You're listening to Standing Before the Mast podcast with Chris Heaton, sponsored by Newport Nautical Supply.
What do you do following retirement from a successful career of 26 years in the Navy, which began at the US Naval Academy? You enroll at the International Yacht Restoration School, otherwise known as IYRS School of Technology and Trades, in Newport, Rhode Island, where you acquire a whole new set of skills in marine systems. You and your wife then buy a catamaran, sell everything you own, move your family aboard, and go cruising. That's what Glenn Robbins and his family did. Glenn was a classmate of mine from high school who I'd not seen in over 30 years when, in the summer of 2019, he walked into our shop. Glenn and his family had arrived in Newport on their, new to them, Leopard 46 catamaran. As you'll hear from our talk, Glenn has an infectious level of enthusiasm and energy which he channeled into impressive levels of preparation and planning. He also offers us a dose of reality about living and cruising aboard, and it's not all cocktails and sunsets. He takes us on their journey from purchasing the boat in Florida and bringing it up to Newport. They then brought it down to Virginia, where they joined the Salty Dog Rally to the Caribbean. After some time in the islands, they made the passage across to Panama and through the canal. They cruised on the western side of Panama and then transited back through the canal, where their ultimate destination was Florida. All of this takes place while a global pandemic was unfolding. Glenn gives us a detailed picture on everything from solving problems and repairs to the history of the places they visit and the excitement of fishing off a catamaran. This episode is a bit longer than I typically post, but Glenn's ability to convey their adventure is so rich in content and well described, there really was not much I could remove. If you're considering setting off on your boat for an extended period of time, I think this is a worthwhile listen. You can learn more about their adventure by visiting svfearless.com. That's SV as in sailing vessel, fearless.com. And for more information about IYRS School of Technology and Trades, visit IYRS.edu. My sincere thanks to Glenn for being so generous with his time on this. I hope you enjoy. So I guess we'll start with, you had a career in the Navy.
I did. So, of course, you and I went to high school together. And after high school, I went on to the Naval Academy down in Annapolis, and then had a 26-year career in the Navy. So when that was done, we were looking at our options for join the workforce right away or try to do something amazing. And we chose the amazing bit, but it involved stepping through a significant amount of fear to get there. And ultimately, we named our boat Fearless because it was a reminder of what we had to do and the steps that we had to take to get to that point where we were willing to commit. And it's not easy. It really is not an easy decision to make when you start talking about separating yourself from all of your worldly possessions and, getting rid of most of your stuff, if that's what you have to do, which is what we did. Sold cars, sold, furniture, houses, whatever. It just everything. Had a fire sale and said, okay, it's time to just go. So that's what we did. Yeah.
Had you cruised as a family before?
Never.
No, not even a charter or a family holiday?
Nope. We spent one long weekend on a boat with a friend of ours in Italy. We lived there for 6 years towards the end of my naval career. And we met a gentleman who was a carbon fiber engineer. He was also an America's Cup sailor at one point back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And he took us out for a weekend. He had a semi-custom Milius 46, which is an Italian design. It's a mostly racing, but somewhat, a little bit cruising boat. But we went out to Ventotene and, right in the Tyrrhenian Sea. But it was only a long weekend, and there were 14 of us on board. It was amazing. But that was it. That was the only experience we had as a family cruising or doing any kind of sailing.
And how did you decide to go to, you said you didn't go the corporate route. How did you decide to go to IYRS?
So I was in Newport for my last assignment in the Navy, and I just took a walk down Thames Street one day, and I remember reading something about IRIS. I didn't really know about the school, so I decided to just take a walk. I remember seeing the yard arm and the cross tree, the mast that they had out front with the flag. So I stopped into the IRIS parking lot and walked in and talked to the admissions folks. And then I got invited to an open house, which I went to, and I was just so impressed. I had met a number of people throughout my life in the Navy who had really amazing skills. And I'm talking about life skills, like, could fix and paint a car, could make incredible wood carving, or micro lathe products, and it's stuff like that. That just, I've always been an admirer of craft work.
Hmm.
And when I stepped into IRIS, I thought, yeah, this is amazing. It was a chance to work with my hands, a chance to do some of that craftsman-like work that I had always admired so much, but never really had a pathway to get there. And I thought, well, this is an opportunity. But then I stepped back from it and I said, no, I can't do this. I have a family. I need to provide for them. I need to do do what all my other peers were doing. And it was actually my wife who encouraged me. She said, no, you want this. You need this. This is something that would be very good for you. And there were some other veterans in the program in the class ahead of me. And I had a long talk with one of them, who was a retired Army officer. And he said, he looked at me, he said to me, dude, it's going to be okay. I said, oh, well, maybe it is. He literally said that to me. He's like, dude, it's going to be all right. And I said, wow,
Nice.
okay, maybe it is. And maybe we just need to let go
Mm.
and be okay with that decision. And shortly after that, we had a conversation. It was an amazing conversation with good friends of ours who are actually here in Anacortes, Washington, where we are now. And they were one of the influences for us to come here. And one of them looked at me and she held her hands out in front of her like this. And she said, she clenched her hands up tightly. And she said, if you're holding on to everything in your life, there's no place for anyone to put something into your hands.
Mm.
There's no landing pad for anything. You need to be able to open up your hands and let go. And then you'll be amazed at what fills your hands when you do that. And it was an analogy, right? I mean, she was just,
Sure.
but it was so powerful. And it was one of those moments where we said, wow, that everything is going to be okay if you're just willing to let go and step through the fear. And that's what ended up being the sort of the final tipping point for us to say, okay, we're going to do this and it's going to turn out okay. And by this, I mean, go through trade school and then see where that leads. We didn't have an outcome at that point. We didn't know where it was going to lead. And at that point, we hadn't decided if we were even going to go sailing or not.
Oh, okay. So you hadn't decided, okay, I'm going to do this training
No.
and then get a boat.
No, it was, let's try this on for size. And then if things are going okay, yeah, let's get a boat. Because we had been looking at it, and there were a number of YouTube influencers by this point that we had been looking at. Some of the ones who had been doing it from the get-go, Sailing the Vagabond, Gone with the Winds. I mean, a lot of people watch those YouTube channels. And I just remember sitting on my couch going, I want to be a guy sitting on my couch watching videos. I want to be out there doing it. But I mean, honestly, Chris, how do you do that? I mean, how do you just decide? And then we had these sort of esoteric conversations about, well, who are these people who just burned the farm and just walked off and bought a sailboat and sailed over the horizon. And it seemed on paper so easy, but when you actually are talking about taking your kids and your wife and burning the farm and leaving everything behind, it's a big decision to make. And I knew that if I didn't go to IRIS, we wouldn't do it. And that was one of the reasons why, it was sort of in the back of my mind of, if I don't get those skills that IRIS imparts on you, and I went through the Marine Systems program, which was unfortunately only 6 months long. I was hoping it would be 9, but when class ended in 6 months, I was I'm not ready for it to end yet. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm
Right.
having too much fun. It was amazing. Such a great experience. And I kept coming home every day from that. And, my wife, Andy, would say, well, how was class? What'd you learn today? And I said, well, if I learned one thing today, it's don't buy a boat. Because, we're, it's a, it's a marine
Yeah.
systems, basically a repair class. And,
Right.
we're learning all about how to fix all these systems that break. And, the instructor was telling us, well, I replaced this stuff on age alone after just 5 to 7 years. And like, wow, okay,
Sure.
all right,
Yeah.
boats bad. No, no way, no boats. So, but at the end of it, I was still applying for jobs, looking at jobs in the government sector,
Mm.
and none of it panned out. And I think that was almost a sign. And at that point, we said, all right, you know what? Let's do this. My surviving parent, which is my mother, had just passed away from a year-long battle with cancer. And I remember looking at her as she was, in the final week of her life, thinking, what if I'm there
Mm.
and I never did this? And
Right.
what if I just worked, and then at the end of it, suddenly I succumbed to cancer and died? And that happens to a lot of people,
Mm.
where your life ends a lot earlier than you think it's going to. And we wanted to give our children this experience. Because, I mean, there are a lot of dynamics going on here, right? I mean, the oceans are changing, climate is changing. We are seeing that the frequency and ferocity of hurricanes are increasing. And we also knew that, the amount of plastics that were jumping in the ocean is increasing, and to seriously detrimental impacts. And that was another goal. We said, well, what happens if there is no ocean? And
Mm.
that's a bit of an overstatement, right? But sea life is being impacted by human influence, and we wanted to show them that. We wanted to get out there and show the kids what the ocean is really like, the magic of it, the power of it.
Mm.
And so that was one of the influences that drove us. And that, with the passing of my mom, my dad had passed away back in 2007, and so just looking at that and thinking about life and what it all means, we boiled this all down to two factors that everyone is familiar with, and that's time and money. You can always make more money, but you can't make more time.
Right.
And that was something that drove us. And we looked at that equation and said, okay, how do we get this done? We made the decision for me to go to IYRS, and that was an important first step that would lead to the decision to go sailing. And then we decided, you know what? Okay, fine. We have these skills. Let's do this. Let's just commit all of our resources to this and make it happen. And
Mm.
we'll just live with whatever consequences result from this, good or bad. We're going to be okay with it. And so we did.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what made you choose the boat you chose? And
Ah,
how did that come about? Was
uh,
that planned
so,
or?
ooh, yeah, well, not by me. So, my wife was convinced that we wanted a catamaran to cruise, and I said, I'm not a catamaran sailor. I've never, I grew up
Mm.
coastal cruising in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and we had a monohull, 35-foot monohull. That was a big boat for the 1980s. And
Right.
she said, no, I think I've looked at a lot of different boats, and I think we want a Leopard 46.
Well,
And I
that's
said,
specific.
yeah, it was very specific. It was, and I said, okay, um, right. That's a big boat. That's two 46-foot boats glued to each other with a living room.
Yeah, right.
So we started. All right, fine. Let's look for one, and there were none to be found. I mean,
Mm.
they're just it's a boat that's a pretty hot commodity. They have a kind of a cult following to them. They were a very well designed and well built boat, especially the later runs of them when they had worked out some of the kinks. The later
Mm.
years, they only made it for 4 years, and so finding one that was not a beaten up, used up charter boat, former charter boat, was really, really hard. And we started to become disheartened with the search, because finding a good boat is difficult. There are boats out there, but finding a good boat is hard. And so we decided to go on a fact-finding mission down to Fort Lauderdale, which is where all the catamarans are in, South Florida. We flew down there, and we were so discouraged by what we saw. Just the boats that were on the market were just in such a sad state of affairs. And then I went and actually took a Leopard 46 it was the only one available in the United States, the continental United States. And I took that one to survey. I said, all right, you know what? I flew down to see it first, and I went, no way. And then we looked at it, and Andy kept saying, I really think we want this Leopard 46. And so I went, all right, fine, I'll take this to survey. I'll see this one through. And it was a disaster. The survey was a mess. It turned up all kinds of problems, and one of the engines failed. And I mean, it's like a nightmare day for the owner. I felt really bad for him. But so we went back.
What year is this? What timeline? What year?
Right. So this is 2019. So
Okay.
this is pre-pandemic, and the catamaran market though was still really hot and getting hotter. So we hit it at a point when it was not, people weren't giving boats away. Like 2-3 years ago or earlier than that, you could get a boat that was probably $50,000-$80,000 cheaper from what they were going for now. So we got discouraged and went back to the drawing board. We hired a boat broker at that point and said, okay, we need to find a boat. And eventually, Andy just got sick and tired of waiting for things to come our way. And she joined the Leopard Catamaran Owners Group. She joined the Leopard 46 Catamaran Owners Group. She shot out an email to the entire group and said, I'm looking for a Leopard 46. She gave them the backstory. We're a military family. We just retired. We want to take our kids, show them the ocean. And she shot that out. And literally within a day or two, we got a reply back from this guy who said, I love your story.
Wow.
If it's the right, I have a boat I'm thinking about selling, not convinced. If it's the right boat for you and the right price for me, let's talk. And it turned out that it was a 2010 Leopard 46 owner's version that had been absolutely tricked out and absolutely pampered by the previous owners. They loved the boat. They treated it like their child. And the earliest versions of the Leopard 46 had no access to the helm station from the cockpit. You had to walk out and up the starboard side to get to the helm station. You couldn't just access it directly. And that was the design. It wasn't, I want to say it's a design flaw, but it was a limitation that we were not willing to live with.
Is that what made it the owner's version? You referred to it as an owner?
No, the owner's version is all the layout inside. So
okay.
The charter versions of the Leopard 46 and most catamarans are 4-cabin, 4-head. So for all of the different guests, the cockpit configuration changed in, I believe, the late 2008 model. So they only ran this boat from 2008 to 2012, and the earliest models had, again, no access, as if it were going to be purposely built for the charter fleet. And then they started making versions where they had a staircase or a little, ladder that went up to the helm station. It's a semi-raised helm station on the starboard side of the cabin trunk. And for safety reasons, I did not want the kids having to walk, out and then up the starboard side to get to the helm station. I wanted easy access for all watchstanders to get back and forth. So, anyways, we were looking for that specific boat, and it's amazing. It's kind of like the job search, when you're looking for a job, people tell you to be very, very specific about what you're asking for. And it was a lot easier for us to find a boat when we took that approach and said, I want a Leopard 46. I would prefer an owner's version. It has to be within that 4-year model run, one that was built after they started, they redesigned the cockpit.
Right.
And then beyond that, we had some flexibility because we had to. But anyways, we came back, coming back to this boat, it was a 2010 owner's version, and it had just been recapitalized. The owner had put on new standing rigging, new sails, brand new lithium batteries, put on the Rely-On lithium iron phosphate batteries, 1,200 amp hours worth. Wow. I mean, ice maker. I mean, it was. We had almost 2,000 watts of solar panels, and the boat was just pristine, low engine hours. We couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit above our budget, and we said, oh boy, what do we do here? And then we came back to that time or money. This boat was ready to get underway, and a lot of listings will tell you, boat is sail away ready, right? And it's not. This one actually was. And we 5 days after we took possession of the title, we were underway in the Western Atlantic, excuse me, going up the eastern seaboard from Florida to Rhode Island.
Wow.
So
When did you take possession of her?
So this is how fast this happened, Chris. We sent the email out on July 2nd and got contact with the owner on July 3rd. By July 31st, we were owners of that boat.
Oh, wow.
It was insanely fast. And so things happened very quickly. Andy and I flew down to Florida on July 20th, and the owner was very specific. He said, look, if you come down here and we go through the boat had been put up in Fort Pierce, Florida, and it was strapped down for hurricane season per his insurance requirements. And he said, if we build this boat out and float it, and then you decide you don't want it, all of that cost is on you. I said, okay, but he said, I'm very confident that you will want this boat because we have taken good care of it. And oh, by the way, he was a retired Marine. And my recommendation to anyone out there is, if you're going to buy a boat, buy one from a retired Marine, because they are absolutely meticulous with the level of detail they put into things. And that's true with their training, and that's true with how they live their lives in most cases. So and we had the military to military relationship. So there was this underpinning of trust that went into it. And the veteran to veteran sale process made it very, very easy. And that would come back to us again when we sold the boat in this past June.
Right.
So, yeah.
Wow. And so when you took possession of it, you then decided you knew you were coming up to the Northeast.
We knew. So now remember, it's July 31st.
Right.
And our first day of boat ownership was August 1st, 2019. And we are about to enter the heart of hurricane season, and the boat is sitting in Fort Pierce, Florida.
Yikes.
Yeah. Yikes. So because we are so new to cruising, I'll back up one step here and say that we had hired cruising coaches. And if there's one thing that I would tell any new cruisers or cruisers or people who are thinking about going into that lifestyle, time and money, we hired cruising coaches to help us shortcut a lot of the decisions and a lot of the processes that tend to trip up new cruisers. I mean, a lot of people will buy a boat and they'll get to know it over the course of a year or 5 years, and then they'll go sail it when they're I guess they're most comfortable. We didn't have that luxury. So we thought, all right, how do we shortcut these processes? And the model of hiring a coach is so beneficial. Professional athletes do it, right? I mean, Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, all the greats of all, the greatest of all time, Katie Ledecky, the Michael Phelps, all of them. They became great because they had coaches who knew how to push them in the right ways.
Right.
And we hired Jamie and Bean Gifford, who had twice circumnavigated the world with their children on a Stevens 47 monohull. And they were fantastic. They only take a few clients, but we happened to be one of them, and we had a great relationship with them, and they really helped us sort through. Like, I would look at a listing and go, hey, Jamie, check out this boat. And you go, no, look at that. Check out you can see the stitching on the sails coming off, and this is wrong, and look at the windlass and look at the chain. And I didn't even see that. Like, okay,
yeah.
So it was, and all virtually. He did all of this virtually. So we had the coaches in our corner, and they helped us. They helped us get to that point. We found the boat ourselves, but they helped us vet it, I guess, and then help us through the negotiation for buying it. And then one of the things that we did was hire a captain to help us deliver the boat, because here we were brand new. We left the kids up in Massachusetts, flew down to Florida, and then Andy and I sailed the boat north with Gray Harker, who was a delivery skipper from Harker's Island, North Carolina. If you've ever sailed up and down the East Coast, you've sailed right by Harker's Island. So
yep.
Yeah, great guy. And we 6 days, up the Gulf Stream and around Cape Hatteras, and it was a little sporty going around Hatteras just with the thunderstorms and stuff. So that was our sort of welcome to the Atlantic. And then the rest of the trip was uneventful. hooked a huge yellowfin tuna and had it right up against the boat. Like, I'm like, wow, sailing's great. Just throw a line in the water. And, but we were right off Nags Head, North Carolina, and it was the right time of year, and the tuna were migrating, or certainly
Sure.
working their way up the Gulf Stream. And I was like, oh, we didn't boat them, of course. We got
Right.
them alongside the boat, and it took me 45 minutes to get this grand piano feeling fish up against the boat. And
Wow.
he took one look at the boat, dove under it, broke the leader off on the rudder or the prop, and it was
See
gone.
ya.
Ah, yeah, gone. It's like, oh, but that was our introduction to cruising, and it was a good start. But it was also, with the weather going around Cape Hatteras, Jamie Gifford had told us, just beware, capes and headlands have their own weather. So you
Mm,
might leave on a good forecast, but capes and headlands don't pay attention to the forecast. They have their own influences and then therefore produce
right.
their own weather patterns and currents and everything else. And he was right. It was pretty sporty going around Hatteras. And then once we got past that, it was fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you came right into Newport, or did you stop
Yeah.
elsewhere? Yeah.
Came right into Newport, and then walked into Newport Nautical Supply. Hadn't seen you in 30 years.
I know. Yeah, that was a surprise. I think I had heard that you had gone. Oh, I know. I saw. I think I get email from IRIS, and I had seen that you had been there and maybe presented. You'd been presented with some award or something for maybe graduation. And I remember flipping through the photos, saying, "Oh, I know that guy."
Yeah. Yeah, they were updating their I didn't get an award for anything, but they were updating their student outreach videos and content and so on. And I had written some blogs for the school from the
Mm,
veteran perspective because I was so impressed with the program there. I mean, IRS it holds a very special place in my heart,
mm,
especially after being um, on the water full time with a 46-foot catamaran where we had two diesel engines, we had a diesel generator, we had all of the what I would call quality of life systems as well. So think of those as your alternating current systems on board the boat: air conditioning, ice maker,
mm.
additional refrigeration if you have that, but all of your um, microwave, anything that plugs into a washing machine, and then all of the life support systems, so water maker, and then all of your propulsion systems and sanitation and everything else. So all of those systems, I touched every single system on the boat, and I did it with the confidence of a person who had gone through a program like IRIS. And that was what, if there's one piece of advice that I would give to people who are thinking about taking off and going cruising, is that it really it is to your benefit
Mm,
to take even a couple of weekend workshops. But if you can go through a program, a 6-month program like IRIS, and they are around the country, they have them even out here in Anacortes, Washington. University of Washington has some programs out here that they run. But the learning the tradecraft, even if you never touch a wrench on your boat and never fix anything, you can at least troubleshoot the systems and understand them.
sure.
Because understanding them before you operate, especially when you get into that blue water environment, you've got to know what you're talking about and know what you're doing, because
Mm,
the ocean is remarkably unforgiving, and it's
right.
also ruthless in ferreting out any kind of weakness at all in your plan, in your boat, in your hardware, in your systems. It does not care. It is absolutely ruthless and efficient and brutal at
Yeah.
exposing any weakness. You leave a line dangling over the side, anything, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It will find it and exploit it. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Iris, yeah, so Iris was, I was so enthusiastic about the program that I wrote a number of blogs, so, encouraging other veterans to consider this decision. Maybe not a marine trade school, but just a trade school, because it, it it was not the financial um, pit that I thought it would be. Like, I'm not earning an income, and I'm going to school, but it never. It was only 6 months, so we were able to
Mm.
survive that just fine. But it saved us so much money and time later on down the road when we kept the boat just running perfectly.
Well, yeah,
It helped
you're
out.
your own mechanic, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I used to joke when we were on the boat that, I was the chief engineer and my wife was the operations officer, and she just handles logistics beautifully. She just can solve getting, if I was troubleshooting a system and identified the part we needed, she could connect the dots from where it was to where we needed it to be,
Mm.
and it would get there. So it was a really good balance.
Did you practice? I only asked this question because I had two friends that operated like this. One was a delivery I did where the captain said, or the skipper said, everybody's going to shower at least once a day, unless it's just not possible due to weather. The other was a friend who was in the Coast Guard, and he was telling me how they ran every piece of equipment every day. And the logic was you're touching it, it works, and you're cycling. With the case with the water maker, he wanted to make sure that thing was constantly in operation. He didn't want it to sit. That was the
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
That was a challenge for us, especially the water maker is a great system to focus on, because when we were on the East Coast, in Newport, we were hooked up to shore water, so we didn't use the water maker. And then as we made our way down the East Coast, especially when we got into Chesapeake, we went to the Annapolis Boat Show, and we were there for a solid month on a mooring ball. And the amount of uh, contaminants in the water. And there was one point during the powerboat show that there was a huge diesel spill. And I'm not I'm not making water with this. We were running
No.
jugs into the town dock in Annapolis, and I knew that water maker was just sitting there, and it was a source of stress. But I'm not going to turn it on
Sure.
in
Right.
those conditions. So
Well, that's a good
we
point.
should have,
Yeah.
in hindsight, in over those couple months, we should have pickled it. We ran it sparingly, but then when we needed it, when we were offshore on our way down to Antigua, in November of 2019, I had a hard time getting it started again.
Hmm.
And but that it was an interesting story, if you don't mind me
No.
just sharing that. So, just quickly filling in the gaps, we bought the boat in July, so end of July, sailed it to Newport, and we arrived August 11th, 2019. Stayed up there for about 6 weeks, and then once Hurricane Dorian had gone by, we saw our window to get south before the nor'easters start setting in
Right.
October. So we ran south, down Long Island Sound, stopped in Port Washington for a few days, ran and did some touristy stuff in the city, and then went through the East River uh, by Manhattan. And that was one of the highlights of our
Mm.
entire cruising experience, was going down the East River. It was an amazing experience. One of the most challenging from a tide planning perspective. And I think I
Oh
was in the
yeah.
pilot, the tide book. I think I ran the numbers. I must have been 50 times. And then
Right.
the day of, I was like, stopwatch under the bridges. We have this much time to get to the next bridge. So I planned it out to the absolute second, and it all worked out. So,
Hmm.
um, you know, yeah, luck favors the prepared, I guess. But I was
Right.
so nervous about getting through Hellgate at slack water. It just yeah. Um, so we went down through New York, and then continued on to Cape May, and then up the Delaware River through the C&D Canal down to Annapolis, and then down to Hampton, Virginia, and then joined the Salty Dog Rally to leave November 2019 to jump down to the Caribbean.
Oh
And
wow.
so in all that time, we didn't really use the water maker, and so we brought extra crew on board for the passage. It was a 12-day passage, 1,600 nautical miles, and by day 8, going back to your statement about the captain authorizes a shower for everybody. Oh,
Hmm.
we had too many people on board to authorize that, and we all smelled really, really bad. And water was getting low, and we got chased by a really bad storm, and we had to get far enough south, and I think it was like north 28 latitude, if I remember correctly. We had to get far enough south to get away from this storm, and we got caught in that frontal sort of friction boundary as the trade
Hmm.
winds, the warm air and the cold air were rubbing up again. And it was just like, it was this night of nights where we were seeing 50-knot squalls go through. It was black as the ace of spades outside,
Wow.
rain, thunder, lightning. It was awful, just absolutely awful. And this was day 7 of our passage, I think. And so we had been underway for a while. And finally we punched through that. And the next day we just get into these big rolling Atlantic swells, and it was calm, almost no wind, and we just stopped the boat. And I said, all right, let's just make some water. Let's just regroup, because we got really beaten up that night. And we had an 19-year-old kid on board with us, a good son of good friends of ours. And like, we need to send somebody over the side, and, with a butter knife, and just kind of poke away at the inlet for the through hull for the water maker. It was up forward, and I couldn't prime. I don't know what was going on. We just couldn't prime the pump. So maybe there's a barnacle or something stuck in there. So, Eli was sleeping. Go wake him up. Like, Eli, I got a job for you. Hand him a butter knife. And we tie a rope to him and throw him over the side, and say, here it is, to go chip away at this. So he's got a mask and fins on. He's down there, trying to chip away. And he comes up for air, and he says, there's something big underneath us, and it's coming up. And I thought he was just saying that to be funny for the kids, because the kids were up in the bow watching him. And this, sure enough, this whale came out of the depths, and to check out the boat. It was a minke whale. Wow. And we could tell because he had chevrons on his flukes, or his flippers, excuse me. And he's just started circling the boat. And so the kids, we're in 19,000 feet of water. We are 1,000 miles from anything.
Right.
And the kids are all like, "Now, Dad, can we jump in? Can we go swim with the whale?" I'm like, "Kids, we don't know what this is." I'm frazzled. I'm trying to get the water maker going, and they're like, "I'm fine, I'll go ask Mom." So they go running down below, and they're like, "Mom," she wakes up from a nap. She's like, "Whale!" And so everyone just like puts on life jackets and jumps over the side with this whale, and mask and flippers and stuff. And we had one person ultimately say, we got the water maker running, which is great. I was like, okay, I'm calm now. Water maker's primed. We're making water. Okay, this is good. And so I jumped in with the whale too, and it was amazing. One of those life experiences that you will never forget. We're swimming with a whale, rolling in easy Atlantic swells in 19,000 feet of water. You could just see that, the rays reflecting off the thermocline coming back up at you, and this beautiful, gentle creature who was as curious about us as we were about him. And for about 45 minutes, we just swam with him. And eventually he left, and he said, okay, sun's starting to go down. It's time to continue on our way down to Antigua. We were still a couple days out, and off we went. And that was an amazing experience for that first really long passage. And it was such a morale booster after that, just, that awful night we had the night before where everyone was just frazzled.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I love how you stayed focused on the water maker. You weren't going to swim with the whale until you sorted out the water maker.
Well, I mean, so this is something else, Chris, that I think is important to impart upon people who are considering going out to sea and taking their family. And I'll use a story from another friend of mine. And this, by the way, is the same guy who told me, "Yeah, dude, it's going to be okay." He ended up buying a boat too. And it took him a while to get that boat underway and get it going. He had a number of mechanical issues he had to work through. And so he was actually behind us in the timeline by a year in getting underway, even though he was ahead of me in school. And he made his first run from Annapolis to Newport, or Newport to Annapolis, was one way or the other. I can't remember which way, but I said, "John, how'd it go? How'd your first passage go?" And he goes, "Well," he said, "the guys I had with me on board thought it was great, and I was pretty stressed out." He said, "It's a lot different when you're on someone's boat as a passenger versus being the skipper and the owner and having that shroud of responsibility over you to make sure that those systems work." And that was something that never, I never let go of that. When we were underway, when you say, focus on the water maker, it was about water. We were down to a quarter of our capacity. And I knew that we could make it, but I didn't want to have to ration water. And I didn't want the kids ever to worry that when they turned the tap on, nothing would come out. And that was my mantra throughout all of our cruising experience, was that my responsibility are the boat systems. I am the chief engineer, and I'm going to make sure everything works as it should, when it should, because when you need it is the moment when you don't need to be fixing it. And whether it was the washing machine or the water maker, it didn't matter to me if a system was down, I was going to do everything in my power to bring it back up online again, because everyone was counting on me to do that. There was nobody else who was going to come rescue us. Nobody, no flyaway team that was going to come sort it all out. It was us, and that was it. And once you adopt that mentality of self-sufficiency, you become far more aware of, I think, your limitations, but also, I think, far more aware of what you can do if you put your mind to it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and water is life.
Yeah, exactly. You get ultimately you get to the Caribbean.
Yep.
What was the destination port on that trip?
So destination port was English Harbor, Antigua, and
Okay.
that ended up being our favorite destination. It absolutely beautiful. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's where Admiral Nelson had his fleet headquartered, and it's, if you read any naval history, which I know you have, and I'm an avid reader. If you look at the quasi-war that the United States had with France in the late 1790s, England was an ally of, sort of, I guess we were enemies with their enemies, so they became our friends of sorts at that point after the American Revolution. And we had several of our first 6 frigates go down and fight ship-to-ship actions with the French right in the vicinity of Montserrat and Guadeloupe. And that is all within in sight of Antigua. And you understood why the British had their base there. First of all, it's the most beautiful and natural harbor in the Caribbean and most protected. But it's right in the right square in the middle of all of the trade that was going on down there and the competition that was happening in the Caribbean at that time. So it was such an amazing experience to be there. We're like, wow, we fought ship to ship battles here in 1797,
Right.
in 1798. And right there in Montserrat, and Admiral Nelson was married over on St. Kitts, and so and so, this French privateer was over on Guadeloupe, and you're like, wow, it's really cool.
It's all
So
connected.
the history is really amazing. And a lot of when the sugar plantations were at the height of slavery, a lot of the food came from the East Coast of the United States. So the run that we had just made was also one that was U.S. ships, merchant ships, and warships made that trip regularly from Hampton, Virginia, down to the islands to supply them.
So you're hanging out down there. How did you decide? I know because I watched your videos on YouTube. How did you decide to migrate in the direction of Panama and ultimately the canal transit?
I guess so. We got down there November of 2019, and now remember I told you most people will spend a year getting ready to sail. We didn't have that luxury. So once we got down there, we realized that we had some catching up to do. So rather than do the normal island hopping routine that most people like, hey, I'm going to go down to Martinique, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, we decided that we were just going to stay in the vicinity of Antigua for a couple months and just go, you know what, let's take all pressure off. Let's just learn the boat, teach the kids, get used to things. And then about that time, when that period ended, COVID hit. And that was a huge shock. We saw it coming. I mean, I was watching the news, February, March, this is coming. And all of a sudden it started to get real down in the Caribbean. And we made the decision to run up to the US Virgin Islands because we knew that was US territory. And we ended up spending 4 months there. And then that took us out to June, late June. And we said, okay, we got to get south now. So we went south for hurricane season all the way down to Grenada. And by that point, people had gotten a handle on how they were handling COVID, but it was a circus for a while. Nobody knew what was going on. And once we spent hurricane season in Grenada, and then we said, all right, what are we going to do now? We're kind of at a crossroads. Do we want to spend another season in the Caribbean, or do we want to go somewhere else? And we decided, friends who had gone to Panama, but then had to leave their boat there for COVID, had flown back. They decided they were going to go through the canal into the Pacific. We said, you know what? They're good friends. They were right there with us at the very beginning of our cruising experience. And we said, okay, let's go join them. So we sailed up to St. Martin. We went from Grenada to St. Martin. We had to pick up a new tender and a new outboard motor, and got that. Went to Puerto Rico. We're there for Thanksgiving in 2020, and then we made the run in early December after Thanksgiving to Panama. And that last sort of I guess we call it that last stable weather window before the Christmas winds down in the Caribbean
Sure.
really kick in.
Yeah.
We had one of the best sails of our entire experience. It was that downwind run from Puerto Rico to Panama. It was beautiful, absolutely
Straight
beautiful.
shot. Yeah.
Straight shot.
Yeah.
Yep, right on through. That was a little over 1,000 miles, and it was beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think I had read, or maybe I'd watched it in your video, you had actually did a dry run on somebody else's boat through the canal before you brought your own family through, correct?
Right. So the Panama Canal, from a private yacht perspective, is it it is amazing, but it's also very daunting. There is a lot of energy going through that canal. Big ships, a lot
Mm,
of water moving, and it really helps if you can see it once before you actually have to do it on your own boat. And it's very well managed from the canal perspective. They
mhm.
bring advisors on board. You can hire line handlers, which we did, and I highly recommend anyone going through the Panama Canal hire the local line handlers. They take all of the stress off. We became good friends with them because the ones that helped us on the way southbound were the same ones that helped us on the way north. Like, hey guys, it's good, welcome back. They were great. They were fantastic. We
It looked
loved
like
them.
they were a part of your family on the video.
No, they were. Yeah, they're playing cards with my daughter in the cockpit, and they were fantastic. So the Panama Canal was a incredible experience, but because they helped make it that way, and then we of course did due diligence, and we hired an agent to help us with all the paperwork. That really helped out. And then the marina manager in Shelter Bay, at least when we were there, a guy named Juan Ho, who many cruisers know him from Puerto Rico, phenomenal human being, and just he also is so helpful in navigating or helping you navigate the paperwork and the bureaucracy of Panama to help get through the canal and get checked in
Mhm.
and everything else. So yeah, the Panama Canal was that was actually the Panama Canal was a strong pull for us just to go through the canal, to have
Mm,
that experience, because we looked at it and it's like, okay, cruising, are we going to look back on our cruising experience and regret that we didn't go through the canal? And
right.
the answer was yes, because it is such a wonder of human engineering. And when you
Mm.
see it, you have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, I talked with one of my earlier guests, and I think she's been through both, but she had been through the Suez Canal as well more than once. And she was talking about the differences, and the Suez is literally just a cut in the sand.
It is. I've
There's,
been through the Suez Canal a number of times, and
mm,
Ferdinand de Lesseps, who was the French engineer who dug the Suez Canal, thought he could do the same design with the Panama Canal, but the Chagres River floods in the rainy season from starting in May and running through the summertime,
right.
and it washed out all of his work. And it's one of those the remnants of the French influence are there. There's a spur where they tried to cut the original cut that they made trying to get from north to south is still there. It shows as a spur on the canal as you come in. And then Eiffel, the same guy who made the Eiffel Tower, designed
Mm,
a lighthouse it's in Shelter Bay. It's still there. So the French influence is still very much visible when you go through. But when you look at the genius of what the U.S. did when we came in there with a plan, and not only that, not only building the canal, but eradicating mosquitoes, which was killing hundreds of people down there, thousands of people.
right.
The U.S. as the U.S. Army doctor came in and said, "I believe mosquitoes are the problem," and nobody had equated mosquitoes with yellow fever and malaria up to that point. And he came up with this bold proposition, got an audience with Theodore Roosevelt, and then said, "This is going to delay everything by a year, but you're going to want this."
Mm.
And someone convinced Roosevelt that this was the way to go. And even today, we didn't have any mosquito problems when we went through the canal, or in Shelter
Wow.
Bay when we were there waiting. Yeah, there are none. It's amazing.
Eradication.
Yeah,
So how far, once you got through the canal, on the Pacific side, what was your plan, or did you have a plan?
we did have a plan. We were going to go all the way up to the Sea of Cortez because at that point we didn't think COVID had a significant
Of
impact
course.
on cruising. The normal cruising route, people go through the Panama Canal, They stop provision, go to Las Perlas, which is the archipelago just 40 miles south of Panama City in the Gulf of Panama. Go there, and then they launch from there out to the Galapagos, and then Galapagos, out into the deeper Pacific. But the problem is the French Society Islands French Polynesia and the Society Islands. There was no guarantee that you could get a visa, and if you did get there, if the visa would change or you'd be asked to leave. And at that point, Australia and New Zealand were closed. So the only option for us really was to go north and west. And so we said, all right, we'll go up to the Sea of Cortez, and we had to get out of hurricane season again if we started making that trip. And that's a long trip. That's 2,000 miles just to get to, just to get to the mouth of the Sea of Cortez, and then it's another 700 miles up into the Sea of Cortez to get out of the hurricane zone. So that's a lot of miles. And we went through the canal, went out to Las Perlas, went around the corner around Punta Mala, which is the mouth of the Gulf of Panama. And I love the Spanish nomenclature for things. Punta Mala, Point Bad, and it is. The Ecuador Current. I mean, they don't mess around with the name.
Yeah.
It's not like Point Sunshine. Absolutely not. It was Point
No.
Bad, and it was. The Ecuador Current goes right alongside that, and you get the trade winds come screaming across the Caribbean, and then they bend south and go across the Isthmus of Panama, and it meets the Ecuador Current right there at Punta Mala, which is 90 miles south. Oh, it's bad. It can get really rough. And so there are ways, and I'm actually going to circle back and write a blog post on how we mitigated that coming back around, because there are a lot of people who start in the Sea of Cortez and they want to go to the Caribbean and they're going to go through the Panama Canal. So they've got to come around Punta Mala. And if you time it with the tides in the Pacific and actually the moon phase, you can mitigate some of the Ecuador Current and knock it down from 3 knots down to 1.5 knots. And if you can get the right wind angle, the right wind speed, it's not so bad.
Wow.
So yeah, that's an adventure. So we went around into the Gulf of Chiriquí on the western side of Panama, and we were starting up towards Costa Rica, and we got all the way to the border and just decided to stop, because at that point we had lost our cruising buddies. They decided, like, no, we're done cruising, we quit. And they they turned around and they went back through the Panama Canal. And so we were out there alone for a month cruising in the Gulf of Chiriquí. But we were still in heavy, I would call it heavy COVID conditions and limitations. So Costa Rica didn't really care what you did, but if to check back into Panama to come the other way was going to be another bureaucratic nightmare. And so we just decided, you know what, let's just stop right here. Instead of going north, let's go back to Panama City when we're done here, and then sort things out. We had our water maker was giving us some problems. The membrane had reached the end of its life, and all of a sudden our parts per million, our total dissolved solids the numbers were starting to go up. We thought, okay, we got to go fix this. And there's nothing in the Gulf of Chiriquí because nobody ever cruises there. So we had it to ourselves. We didn't see another boat for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And we did some amazing diving. Both of our kids got at 11 and 13, both were scuba qualified. And so we went into the Coiba National Park in Panama, which was absolutely stunning underwater. Some of the most complete ecosystems I have ever seen. And it gave me hope that we can protect marine life. I mean, imagine if you've gone to the Boston Aquarium or the Monterey Aquarium and you see that giant cylindrical tank where all the fish are just circling, all of them, sharks, snappers, the whole line of it, big fish, small fish. And we never saw that in the Caribbean, ever. And then we got to Coiba and we dove a couple of the seamounts with a guide, and I didn't know where to look. There was so much happening, and you saw, it was like being in the middle of New York City, but it was a marine New York City. And instead of people, it was fish or marine life. And the sharks and the turtles and snappers the size of coffee tables, and just, it was incredible. And we got to dive with a whale shark. One swam right underneath us. And the Pacific was just some of the work that is being done to preserve life in some of these areas is well worth it. I mean, we saw the benefits of it. It was incredible. Absolutely. It's hard to describe.
Right. That's beautiful.
So that was one of the drivers for getting us over there and getting around Punta Mala, and then knowing that we had to come back. But can you hear that biplane?
Oh, that was a plane. Okay. I wasn't sure if it was my stomach. Yeah.
No, there's literally a biplane circling right over the top of my head. He's going to go away here in a second.
That's right.
But yeah, the driver for us was getting to Coiba and Isla Coiba. It's a big island. It's the biggest island in Mesoamerica, and it's all protected land. So it's all a national park for Panama, but very well worth it. And we saw that, did some diving, and then we were starting to fret a little bit, or at least I was, about the water maker. So we came back around and braved Punta Mala, coming around, and then up into Panama City. And at that point, we said, maybe we should explore. Maybe this is the off ramp for us. It was now, February of 2021, getting into March, and we said, what are we going to do? We can't commit to crossing the Pacific. We're not going to go up to the Sea of Cortez. Maybe it's time to sell the boat in this market. And we casually mentioned it to our boat coaches, who are always grooming new clients, and said, if you are looking for anyone who is selling or interested in buying a boat, I think we're going to sell our boat. And I think a week later, we had committed buyers who were flying out to Panama City from Miami, and they came out. We hosted them for a weekend. They saw the boat, and they're like, "Great, we'll buy it." I said, "Do you want to look in any compartments or anything?
Yeah. You want to tap on anything?"
You want to tap? I said, "Are you going to take my word for it?" But she was it was a husband and wife. They left their kids back in Miami to see the boat, much like Andy and I did. And she was a US Air Force Academy, a couple of years behind me from my graduation date from Annapolis, career Air Force officer. And she and her husband, absolutely amazing people. You got to meet them. They came into Newport Nautical Supply, did the exact same thing that we did with the boat in our first year, which was sail it to Newport. And we just, those guys were fantastic. And the boat sold without ever hitting the market. And we gave them my commitment to them, therefore, was to give them the absolute best turnover that I could possibly create. Everything that I could think of. I promised them that their boat would be as sail away ready as the boat when we bought it.
Right.
And it was, again, that underpinning of trust from the veteran perspective that allowed us to do the entire transaction. We didn't have a broker. We didn't have anyone negotiate anything between us. It was all done via trust. And it was really, really refreshing. And therefore, there was no way I was going to let this Air Force officer have one thing that she could find wrong with the boat. But seriously, it was this tremendous sense of responsibility that we felt, because they were bringing their kids on board too. And I did not want them at all to be offshore with their children on board and have something go wrong that I knew was a problem that I just sort of casually glossed over or swept under the carpet. No way.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. So so they left Panama City. We ended up going back through the canal northbound, and then we sailed from Panama City up to Isla Mujeres, Mexico, the Cancun area, and then from there across the Gulf Stream twice to Tampa, Florida. Sorry, this guy's coming back.
He's back.
Yeah.
Are you near a local airfield there?
No, I think the owner of that biplane, he's another former prowler, Bubba. We used to fly prowlers out of Whidbey Island. I think that's his airplane, and it's a biplane. Okay. Yeah, it's really cool. I think he's just circling over his house.
So the new owners, I didn't realize. I thought you had sold it stateside, or they accompanied you on that last leg.
No, they didn't.
Oh, they didn't. Oh, I'm sorry.
Originally,
I misunderstood the timeline.
Yeah. Okay. So if we back up, in February of 2021, they flew out to Panama City to look at the boat because they were shopping at that point.
Right. I got you.
And at that point, we were still committed to going all the way north to the Sea of Cortez. And we said, look, we're planning on going there. If you want the boat, we'll make it ready for you in the Sea of Cortez. Just tell us where and when. And they said, no problem at all. And then our plans changed. So we went back to them and said, listen, we'll deliver the boat to Florida for you, and we'll get it there by June 14th or 15th at the latest. but we're very concerned about hurricane season for you guys, and we need to make sure that you're comfortable with that timeline. Otherwise, we'll have to work something else out.
Mm.
And when you just talk to people and get a sense of their, what they want, it's amazing what you can work out. So both parties agreed that sailing the boat back to Florida would be the best course of action. They said, we're from Florida, where we live in Miami, where we understand hurricanes. We're not concerned about it. We have a plan to get the boat north up to Newport as soon as we buy it. So get it up here, let's turn it over, and then we'll be underway by July 1st, and getting around the southern part of Florida and hit the Gulf Stream, and then just shoot on up to Newport. So that's what we did, and it was the last passage we made was from Isla Mujeres over to Tampa, Florida, and it was awful. It was absolutely we picked the best weather window we could. We got stuck there for 10 extra days in Isla Mujeres. We planned to stop in. We had a good friend ride up from us from Panama, and he got off in Isla Mujeres, and then we said, we'll just run the boat across. How bad can it be? 350 miles, no big deal. It was awful. Our first crossing of the Gulf Stream was absolutely miserable. We got caught in some contrary wind and current, and it wasn't that the wind was so strong. It was only gusting up to 23, but the wave action was so confused, and they were so big. And at one point, the bow rose and a wave came and hit the inside of the port hull. So we had the two hulls. It passed by the starboard hull, hit the inside of the port hull. I thought the boat was going to split in half. It hit so hard.
Ouch.
And at that point, I said, we had a single reef in the main, and we are literally in this awful sea state. And I thought, I'm not going forward. I'm not sending any. We had jack lines, right? I was like, I'm not sending anyone forward. At one point we had a wave wash over the bow, wash up the front of the boat, and then hit the windscreen on the elevated helm station. My daughter came out wide-eyed and said, "Daddy, is it going to be like this the entire way back?" And I said, "I sure hope not." No, I think I told her it was going to be fine. And in thinking, we're going to sink at sea and be lost. I didn't tell her that. Captain has to have some sort of confidence. But then I started looking at options and said, okay, think. What can we do? What do we have available to us? And so we spilled the wind out of the main. We reefed the head sail in considerably. I just slowed the boat down. I said, okay, we're going to be doing 3.5 knots, but we're not going to get pounded to pieces.
Right.
And anyone who's been across the Gulf Stream, it can be, upwards of 50 to 60 miles wide in parts. And that's a long way to go. That's 10 hours at 6 knots. And so you're just getting pounded for 10 hours. It's bad for morale.
Yeah.
But, we got through that. And then after that, it was fine. The second crossing the Gulf Stream was, almost a non-event. We couldn't even tell we were there. It was only by, position alone that we knew we had crossed it, and then into Tampa and sold the boat and gave them the turnover that we had promised them. And then that was that. Our last sail was helping friends move their catamaran north from the Bahamas up to the Chesapeake Bay. And they were on their way up to Nova Scotia. They were a Canadian family. We had met them early in our cruising experience. Absolutely loved them. They were, great family. And so we said, yeah, sure, we'll help you move your boat. And I had my last fishing experience. We started our fishing experience losing that big yellowfin tuna off Nag's Head. And so I said, this is my last chance. This is the last go around. And I rigged up some ballyhoo on some Islander lures, and we were fishing right off Marsh Harbor, right at the drop off there, and had a massive strike. And this fish hit, and I looked at the line that was not engaged. We were running a couple of trolling lines, and I said, okay, we got to get that line in. And all of a sudden it went quiet. I mean the line, the reel was screaming, and it was just, I thought Brad had put braided backup line on his reel and on his spool, and he did not. And 300 yards of 60-pound mono just left, gone. This fish, whatever it was, I'm guessing it was a bluefin or a huge yellowfin, took the bait and just dove deep with it, and that was that.
That was
gone.
The end of that.
15 seconds of screaming, and then it was over. So
oh man,
that was my last chance at a tuna. We did fish on the way up, and we caught a couple of mahi. That was the extent of it. But then that was it. So we pulled into Hampton, right where we started the Salty Dog 2 years earlier, and
wow.
We walked off the boat. So that was
my first offshore experience ever. I think it was 1989. I went from Newport to Bermuda, and if it's one of those things. If you knew then what you know now, you wouldn't have done it. But it turned out all right. And
Yeah.
the skipper of the boat was this. I think he actually did 2 or 3 years at Annapolis, and he dropped out. When I met him, he was this sort of hippie guy, and we caught a mahi on the way to Bermuda, south of the stream, I think on the southern edge. And we didn't even have a reel. We hand pulled this thing in, this Swedish
Yeah.
girl and I, and we got it in the cockpit and it's flopping around. And I didn't know what to do. I'd never caught anything more than a rainbow trout. So I don't know, Annika, the Swedish girl, or myself grabbed the winch handle, and the captain, Rick, comes running up. He goes, "No, you're going to make a mess of the boat." He came up with a bottle of rum and he threw
Yep.
the equivalent of a shot glass down the gill. And that was the end of that fish.
That's what we did.
I'd never
So
heard.
we had,
I'd never seen
yeah.
that before. It was fun.
So I'm glad you brought up fishing, because fishing is one of those things that I thought I knew how to do. And once we got on board, I realized very quickly I knew nothing about pelagic fishing. That um, there are things that you can do wrong, probably more things you can do wrong than you can do right. And as everyone says, if if you just throw a hook in the water, it'd be called catching, not fishing. But after a while, I met another cruising family, and the husband was a fantastic fisherman, and they ran I think it was a Facebook group, and sailfish tales, I think it was. Anyways, he's just a fantastic fisherman, and so he came aboard. We met them in Antigua, and he came aboard, and we took the boat out fishing. We took the boat out fishing a number of times. Just left the dinghy back, ran 5 lines, because with a catamaran we had 25 feet of beam.
Wow.
So we could run 5 lines, basically a spread, right? So
Mm.
we'd have 4 rods and a hand line going down the middle, and we'd go out and net ballyhoo the night before, and then we'd rig up islander lures and ballyhoo and go out and fish the bottom terrain and look for the ledges, and especially around Antigua, it's fantastic fishing. We ended up having a really good system. And mahi in particular are very active when you bring them on board. So we had a huge Yeti cooler, the biggest one they make, whatever it's 120 cubic something or other liters or whatever it is. And we had that back on the transom, and then we called that our mahi containment unit. And we had this, no, that was it, the MCU. And we would, get mahi, and we would drag them up the sugar scoop, and then right in, like, lure everything, line, and just get them in there, and then slam the lid, and then my daughter would just sit on top of it, and like, blah, 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 blah. It's like having a turkey in the dryer, frozen turkey in the dryer, and then wait for the fish to calm down a little bit, and then we'd get a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and just put it in their gills and just help them expire peacefully and with a little bit of dignity. Without hitting them over the head with a winch handle or the forget me stick. So. But we did that with wahoo. We did that with mahi, and barracuda we didn't keep. Blackfin tuna, we ended up putting all those back as well. In fact, we put back more fish than we kept. If it wasn't a mahi or a wahoo, we didn't keep it. So we just put it back. Yeah, but fishing was a huge part of it.
That was the freshest fish I think I've ever ate.
Yeah, fishing was that was a part of every passage that we did. It was part of our game plan going into it. How we would maneuver the boat. We actually got very serious about it, especially when we took the boat out for a pure fishing trip. But it was those moments when we weren't on a pure fishing trip. Like, how are we going to, if it's just Andy and me and the kids, we didn't have any extra crew on board, which for most of the time we did not. What happens if we get a double hookup? And that happened. We had a number of times. We had a double hookup running a couple of lines. Double hookup of mahi, double hookup of tuna. We had a sailfish at one point, and those are big events. And so we had a pre-planned response to all of that. Okay, who's going to go to the helm? Who's going to get the head sail in?
Sure.
How are we going to manage the boat speed? How are we talking? Who's got eyes on the fish? It worked out really, really well. It took a few iterations of that for us to nail it down, but we practiced a lot because we drag lines all the time. But when we caught a fish, everyone knew where to go. It wasn't just bedlam and chaos and screaming, and of course there was a lot of like fish on, but but everyone had a job, and that was really important. And that's another, I think, important point to bestow upon people. It's one thing to drag a line behind the water and catch a fish, but then what? What do you do with this thing? Especially if you catch a billfish. That was my worst. Like I didn't want to catch any billfish because you got some 60-pound ticked off fish with a sword on the front of his face, like fencing with you. And I don't want nothing to do with that.
No,
So,
you don't want that.
Yeah.
You touched on it. It made me think. It was a question I was going to ask about watching your kids grow and develop, but the fishing really touched on it. Having your daughter sit on top of a Yeti cooler that was flopping about, but it must have been something, not just the fishing, but to see them grow and develop on a boat. Watch them mature and take on responsibilities that perhaps they wouldn't have ashore.
Chris, I'm so glad you brought that point up because it was amazing watching the children adapt to that lifestyle. And they were 9 and 11 when we started, and
Hmm.
watching them get confidence. Towards the end, our son was driving the boat up to a mooring ball. Our daughter was running the windlass up forward. My son would get the boat underway. Watching the kids in the dinghy, they'd jump in the dinghy and just take off. And
Mm.
especially down islands aren't any rules. And we we got back to the United States and we're in Tampa. Now my daughter's salty now. She's got, almost 10,000 nautical miles of blue water sailing under her belt, 2 transits through the Panama Canal. She's used to running around in a 25 horse, rigid inflatable. We get to Tampa and we get to the Davis Island Yacht Club, and we hadn't run the dinghy in a while. And the new owners are going to see the boat soon. And so, hey, Lex, can you just put the dinghy in the water and just run it around the basin a little bit here? So she did. And no sooner had she gotten literally like 50 feet from the boat, and a police boat pulled up and flashed the sirens and the lights and everything else, and basically pulled her over.
Oh my
And
God.
someone had called the police because there were other kids running jet skis through the basin and they weren't
Hmm.
supposed to. So somebody called the police, and the police show up just as my daughter sticks her nose out from the finger piers into the harbor.
Oh.
And they escort her back to our boat. Like, is this your daughter? Yeah, yes, sir, it is. Well, does she have a certificate of competence? Like, what? She has what? Like, and where's her life jacket? I'm like, okay. All right. First of all, she's a boat kid.
Yeah.
Well, I understand that, but back in the United States, we're like, all right. He's like, we're gonna let you go. It'd normally be a $90 fine. I was like, okay, thank you very much. Okay. And Lex was humiliated, and
Oh.
I thought afterwards, does that guy even know this girl, this 11-year-old girl in this dinghy, has more competence and confidence
Mm.
running that boat around than just about every other kid within 100 miles or more,
Mm.
and probably a lot of the adults too. So watching the kids get to that point where they knew their limitations, but they had also grown their skills, and they were so competent. We didn't worry about them. They were great boat kids, and giving kids that experience. And if anyone's out there listening who is thinking about, bringing their kids and how they'll respond, they did amazingly well,
Mm.
and they adapted so well. And what they saw, and then what they were able to do, and then coming back to land with those skills and experiences and perspectives, has made them just more confident human beings. And they're polite. One of the assessments that we get all the time is that our kids actually look people in the eye and they shake their hand, how do you do? And they talk to adults. And that's boat kids.
Mm.
All the boat kids we knew did that. They were all very confident in themselves. And it was a tight knit community out there as well, because they knew that all the other kids who were out there had gone through the same crucible that they had gone through. So it's kind of like going through boot camp. I mean,
Mm.
that first big offshore passage, 12 days for them underway, blue water, out of sight of land for the first time. And for them to go through that, they knew that everyone else had gone through that too. And so it like, we'd pull into harbors and stuff, and it was like, well, they're not boat kids, so we don't want to hang out with them. Like,
Mm.
okay. I mean, I totally get that, because that's, their genre of their peers were the kids who had gone through all that just like them.
Wow.
So yeah, it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, that's funny. You go away from the States and you come back, and then you forget about the strong police mentality. I guess it's probably stronger down in Florida.
No, I mean, we didn't want to be cowboys ever. And
Mm.
I'm very conservative, as a former naval aviator, I'm, very safety conscious, and, that those rules keep you alive when you're out on an
Sure.
aircraft carrier. I mean, carrier aviation was a great learning experience to prepare me for this.
Mm.
It's kind of a funny way to look at it, but you live by a set of rules and you follow those rules, and they're the ones that keep you alive and keep you safe, and keep you from hurting someone else. And so we followed those rules even when nobody was looking. It was important to us, and our kids understood that. And in this particular case, like we had this joke on board. It's like, it's okay to be stupid, just don't do it in public. We didn't want to be stupid. I mean, we didn't want to be stupid in public. And we had read about people getting pulled over, you don't have lights. And down in the islands, it's always like this big free for all. People running around at night holding up an iPhone, for their dinghy lights and so on. And we always had lights and
Right.
follow the rules, 30 minutes before sunset and after sunrise and all that stuff. And just that one time back in the US, and she's literally puttering around the boat, like within 50 feet of us. And
Right.
this giant police boat comes up, this large man with a, gun and a badge. And it's like, oh, is this your daughter? I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? Welcome back.
Welcome home. Yeah. What are your plans now?
We wanted to stay close to the water, so we left the boat without a whole. We didn't have a very comprehensive plan when we left. We just knew that we needed to get the boat back to Florida, needed to get through turnover, and then we kind of entered this world of limbo. And it was a very uncomfortable place to be, and we were not happy. It was a great time to sell the boat, so it was a good market for that. But the housing market is ridiculous. Trying to buy a car is ridiculous. All of these things that we hadn't really anticipated coming back to the U.S. hit us, right in the face. So we finally decided we had to land somewhere. So the very same people who had given us the analogy of the hands open and closed said, hey, the house down the street from us just came available. Why don't you come out here? You can rent it. And so we did. We came out to Anacortes, Washington. Andy and I had met and married out in this area back in 2001. We met just before 9/11. So we came out to Anacortes. It's beautiful out here, and the huge boating community. I've already been out fishing and crabbing, and we've only been here for, I think, 3 weeks. So
wow.
Today I was down on the Snohomish River fishing for pink salmon, and you can just watch them swimming by. It's amazing. So this was a place that pulled to us very, very strongly. I think I'm going to stay in the marine industry. I haven't found a job yet, but I haven't actively looked. We needed to get settled first. And then there is a huge marine presence out here, marine trades, marine services, from both big shipyards down to small, mom and pop size places that I'd like to use the skills that I acquired at IYRS and then put those to work. Because one of the things I found, Chris, and I think you and your dad were both very inspirational in that way, is I loved helping people. I had these skills from IYRS, and there were people who would be confused about something on their boat, and hey, can you come help? Of course I'll come help you. Hey, my outboard engine fell off and it went upside down in the water, and I got it back, but can you help me get it? Sure, absolutely. We learned all that stuff at school. I can help you get your outboard motor back running. I can come over and help you troubleshoot your generator. I love doing that. And so I thought, well, if I love doing it, maybe I can make a living at it. And so I think that's the next step.
That's excellent. Yeah.
At some point, I think cruising gave us the separation between who we were as a military family. We endured a lot of moves, a lot of stress, a lot of separation, a lot of anxiety. And we needed to create some sort of buffer to get us off that sort of that express train of constant movement and stress. And maybe a boat wasn't the best way to do that in hindsight. Like, oh, let's jump on another thing that's constantly moving and changing and everything else. And it can be a huge stress bomb sometimes. We talked about the high highs and the low lows, and the low lows are crushing. When you're exhausted and the marine head decides to blow up, and all of a sudden you're dealing with a huge pile of poo in the bottom of it. Like, it's just it's like I can't handle this anymore. Make it stop. I can't take one more thing going wrong. But we always found a way to sort it out. But now I think our plan is just to settle down and just find some stability and get the kids through high school. And then we can talk about the next adventure after that. But, my daughter was down fishing with me on the Snohomish River today, and she's great. I mean, just watching her with the rod, just casting into the current. She's 11 years old, and she's got her catch card already. And it was fantastic to watch that. And then we'll continue our attachment to the ocean out here in the Puget Sound area, which is just stunningly beautiful.
It does look beautiful. So, I looked at pictures, and when you showed me where you were, I went on Google Earth. I've never been further west than Park City, Utah. Someday I'll get to the West Coast.
Well, we'd love to host you out here. I mean, you guys are always welcome, and we'll make that invitation
We're
readily
we're
available to you.
yeah, we're a bit behind. My wife was supposed to go home. She's from England. She was supposed to come home to visit her mom on March 26, 2020. And as that date drew nearer and nearer, I was
Oh,
panicking
wow.
and going, "I'm worried that you might not make it back."
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, that'll be all right." And but Virgin Atlantic made the decision for us. Well, actually, the UK government made the decision for us when they shut down. So she hasn't been back to see her mom yet. So I don't know when that. And every time we think it might happen, there's a new thing. I don't
Wow.
I don't think she wants to be on a plane for starters.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it's
recycled air, unknown.
yeah. We've flown a number of times now since we got back, and that was a concern for us too. But I mean, we got vaccinated as soon as we got back. It's funny you mentioned a couple of pandemic stories. We were in St. Martin right about the time we were buying our new dinghy. This was let's see, when was this? October 2020, and we left Grenada. We were up in St. Martin, and we had a problem with our washing machine. We needed to get a part sent in. We had a drain pump. Needed a new drain pump. So I found the company, which is Westland Sales, and they're in Clackamas, Oregon.
Mm,
And Oregon, uh, Washington State at that time, this was October, they had locked down. They were just starting to lock down hard for the holidays. And I'm calling this guy from a cruiser bar in St. Martin, and he said, "I'm having a hard time hearing you." I said, "Oh God, I'm sorry. This table next to me is full of French people, and they're all having a great time having lunch, and the music's kind of loud in here." He goes, "How is it?" And our mailing address was Seattle because we're Washington residents. And he goes, so he's trying to get my address down. That's what he was trying to do for the payment. And he said, "How is it that you're at a bar in Seattle and all this noise is going on? I thought they were locking down hard." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm in St. Martin. I need you to send this part to Miami, but I'm really sorry. We're having a great time here. Too
yeah.
bad." But when we bought the boat, the previous owners had made this deal with us, and they said, we're not done cruising yet. I mean, we're selling you our boat, but we love cruising so much. And they lived slopeside in Colorado, in a ski resort in
Oh
Colorado.
wow.
And they said, "How about in March, when it's you've been on the boat now for 9 months or whatever it is, and maybe you're ready to ski now, and how about we do a trade?" So this would have been March of 2020. And
Mhm,
so we it came down to, "Are you coming? Like, is this going to happen?"
mhm.
And we said, "I don't think it's going to be too bad. Let's go ahead and do it." And at the last minute, they had some health concerns, and they decided not to. If we had done that trip, I think we would have missed a year of cruising, and they would have been on our boat, stuck on our boat in St. Martin or
Right.
wherever they were, Antigua, and we would have been in their place in Colorado, locked down. It came that close,
Yeah,
and it got weird with
it
COVID
it it
19.
it did.
We ended up spending COVID-19, that the initial freak out, as I called it, in March, April, May, and June of 2020. We got locked down in Maho Bay, St. John, which is a beautiful place to get stuck. I don't know if you've ever been there, but
Mm,
it's part of the national park. All of St. John's a national park. And we ended up going to the east side over to Coral Bay, which is on the east side of St. John. We ran there from St. Martin. In fact, a good friend of ours who had joined the Salty Dog in November of 2019. The last time we saw him was in Budget Marine in St. Martin. And then we found out a couple weeks later that he had come, he didn't look right. And he was a retired astrophysicist and gynecologist. This guy was a remarkable human being. And he
there's a
was
combination.
normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was in direct contact with Sally Ride when she was on the space shuttle back in because that was the late 80s.
Wow.
And he was doing gamma ray testing from the space shuttle as a graduate student at Columbia University. This guy was remarkable, and he ended up contracting COVID and dying.
Oh,
They airlifted him first to Guadalupe and then to Miami, and then he died. And it was we saw him. COVID was starting to hit the islands. It was starting to become a thing. This was early March of 2020,
mm,
and we ran from Antigua to St. Martin, did a provisioning. That's when we saw him. And then we ran from St. Martin. We did the 90-mile run to St. John, and beautiful downwind sail. It was gorgeous. Again, one of the better sails we
mm,
had. Ran the Jenniker all night long under a full moon. It was just beautiful. Got to Coral Bay, anchored. We were the first ones there, and uh, the locals, after about 10 days, started to get up in arms about people anchoring, right there in their bay. And that part was not included in the national park, so anyone could just anchor there. And we suddenly started getting very concerned about provisions. And so we started, this is now mid-March, and freak out is really starting to happen in the US. This is when the long lines for toilet paper were happening.
Right.
People were waiting around the block for this kind of stuff. And we thought, oh my God, we got to get to St. Thomas in provision. And so we did. When we got to St. Thomas, it was like nothing was going on in the world. We walked in,
Right.
every grocery store was fully stocked. Everything was fine. There were no lines. There was no, like, you had to kind of wash your hands or whatever when you came in. It was
Sure.
like, it's fine. And so we provisioned for the apocalypse. I think we're still eating stuff that we bought in St. Thomas, even in our house now. We pulled it off the boat. But we did this massive provisioning because we didn't know if we were going to get kicked out of St. Thomas, because we heard stories from Puerto Rico where the Puerto Ricans handed control down to the local level for how they wanted to manage COVID.
So
And
it varied.
So it varied. So if someone came into a marina, they could be asked to leave. And then once you leave, you're not allowed into the next place. And Customs
Right.
and Border Patrol they're like, whatever, you come into you're inside the national border, you're fine. I don't care what you do. We'll clear you in. So people coming in with CBP Rome clearance, and they were getting asked to leave and getting chased out of harbors. And so we thought that was going to come to us too. So we were like, all right, I guess we're going to be out at sea for 30 days. We better be ready. So,
Sure.
but we ended up spending 4 months in Maho Bay, and the kids didn't even know COVID was happening. Like they're just swimming with manta rays and eagle rays at night, and tarpon under the boat and so on, and they're just having a blast. But
Well, that'd be interesting 20 years from now when people are talking about it and your kids say, well, we were swimming with manta rays.
yeah,
And it's like, what were you doing during COVID? Well, we were swimming with manta rays, fish.
I wrote about this at one point, and you could say that we were absolutely geniuses for looking into 2020 from 2019, saying, I'll bet there's going to be a pandemic that happens, and being on a boat's the right thing. We had no idea, no clue at all.
No
No, of
clue.
course
Yeah.
not. Nobody does. Nobody has a crystal ball. It came down to one thing, and it was just making a decision to go. The timing didn't matter. And, again, it was time and money. It was just, we're going to buy the boat, and we're just going to get the boat that we want, that's safe and comfortable for us, and we're going to go. I'm not going to worry about it. And it was worth every penny of it.
That's
Yeah.
great. And the boat found a great home.
Yeah.
You know?
There's something, when it comes to buying and selling something that is so much a part of your life, that you also want to find a good home for it, and make sure you find people, vet them so that they are going to take care of the thing that you put so much work into. And that was the same thing the sellers did for us when we bought their boat. They're like, we're not going to sell it to you if you're not going to take care of it. I actually send him updates like every week, pictures like, hey, look what I did. Hey, I polished this piece of stainless steel. It looks just like it did when you gave it to me. And I was very concerned about that, because I wanted him to understand and know that I was taking care of this thing that he gave me. I don't expect that from the people who bought the boat from us, but I wanted to make sure that we gave it to them in a great condition. And that's the lesson out of that is, when you shop for a boat, shop for the owner, because as long as the boat is more or less what you want, if the owner has taken care of it, it'll be a lot less problems for you down the road, because you know that the service has been done, that things have been maintained or updated. You're not dealing with some antiquated piece of junk that's going to fall apart the minute you get offshore. No, we had complete confidence in the boat, and rightfully so. And we got caught in some blows a couple of times where we were seeing 50, 55 knots, and the boat did great. We were freaking out, but the boat did great. The first time you go offshore in a boat that you've just bought, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about the boat, and what kind of spares that you thought you needed, what kind of fishing gear you thought you needed. You learn very, very quickly what is important. And we got to the point towards the end of cruising that I would sit down and chair fly. It was something we used to say back in my aviation days. You sit down and just sort of sit in a chair and visualize your entire flight, whether it was a combat flight or a regular training flight or whatever. You just sit down and just take some time to go through it so you can see what's coming at you. I started doing that. We got comfortable enough. I could sit down and do that with the boat, and I would literally pull out the parts and the tools, especially if it was a passage, and say, okay, what's the most likely thing that could go wrong? And I would have those tools and those spares literally on hand, either, in the cockpit or right in the salon. And a couple times it did play out, like we broke an engine belt. Like, okay, I got a belt right here. I've got the 19 millimeter socket that I know I need to get the belt, whatever, like, and the 2 screwdrivers and the
Yeah.
15 millimeter wrench or whatever. And like, it's all right there. I don't have to go dig for it. Boom, done.
That's intense preparation.
Well, it only takes one time getting burned, like getting stung by something.
Right.
And our first passage, that first big passage in the Salty Dog, we were, I don't know, 3 or 4 days out of Hampton. We were across the Gulf Stream, and it was 7:30 at night. We were in sloppy seas. It wasn't necessarily strong wind, but it was rain, sloppy seas. Things were banging around a lot, and suddenly we were getting a bilge alarm light on the starboard motor, and I went back there with a shop vac and was sucking water out, and I was getting ready to dump the water over the side, and the shop vac fell and went right back into the engine bay, like, ugh. So sucked it all back out again, put the shop vac up on deck, and just as I stepped it on, from the engine bay, I put it up on the deck, the dinghy hoist, the aft part of the dinghy hoist failed, and the tender fell into the water. So now it's 7:30 at night. It's again, black as the ace of spades outside. It's raining. The boat's pounding around, and now the dinghy is hanging from the davits just by the bow only, and it's just smashing
Oh,
around. Yeah, didn't see that one coming. And I thought, like, for a second, we just let the thing go, just like drop, put a hole in it and just sink it right there, because I didn't know what we were going to do. I don't know how we are going to get it back. And we ended up putting like a 50-foot tether on it and just towing it behind the boat all night long. The engine was down. We're just towing it behind us. Thought we're going to have to divert into Bermuda, and conditions eased the next morning to the degree that we could pull the dinghy alongside, and we saw that just a stainless steel ring had broken. This is a connecting ring, but 2 hoisting lines came up to it, and then it went up to the davit, and this ring had literally catastrophically failed. Didn't think to check that before we left. Didn't think to have a spare. I mean, fortunately I had a spare on hand for some other project, but otherwise we would have been screwed and had to figure something else out.
And you might not have even been able to detect a potential failure on that
ring.
You
Can't. No.
Unless you treated it with chemically or X-rayed it or whatever.
And if you're down to that degree of preparation, man, you're better than I am. You're better than most.
Well, I do remember, I know some guys before they go offshore, they do use it. I forgot what it's called, but it's a chemical treatment, and they check certain areas of the rig for it. I think it's a 2-part chemical thing, and it will detect a hairline fracture that's going to cause a problem. You talked about coaching earlier. One of the delivery I went to Bermuda on, it was the last year they did the Caribbean 1500. I think they called it.
Yeah.
It was the last year he left from Newport. They've since only gone from Virginia and gone that way, and I think they skipped Bermuda. The owner of the boat I was on hired Steve Pettingill, who I actually knew from years before, to kind of go over everything. And Steve stepped off the boat, and the first thing he said was, "Replace the furler, replace the headstay." And Steve Pettingill installed a whole new headstay, new furler. I'm glad he did, because we got into some rough conditions, and fear what would have happened had we not replaced that. We could have lost the rig.
Yeah, that is really, really scary. And when we were in Isla Mujeres, we got word through the cruiser net that there was a guy struggling. He was between Cuba and Cancun. He was in rough conditions, and his headstay had parted, and he had run a halyard. He was on like a 38-foot monohull. He ended up making it in, but it was too rough for the Coast Guard to go out and get him. And he was away from the U.S. Coast Guard, and the Mexican Coast Guard said, "It's too rough. We can't go get you." Those are absolute worst case scenarios. I mean, when you're looking at a rig coming down, people make a lot of assumptions. At least in our experience, when we were looking at some of the cruising community, some of the people you look at and go, I don't think you really should be offshore. And one, in that boat, but two, I don't think you know enough about your boat and how to fix it. Circling back to that whole IYRS thing, I can't stress that enough for anyone who is, is going to go offshore. It is not a friendly place out there. It's not like all those YouTube videos that you see. It's not all wine and roses. The ocean can be very, very scary. And it's in those moments that you need to have confidence in your preparation, the inspection of your rigs, that you've done the maintenance and done due diligence, you've checked your billages, all those, the things that you're supposed to do, that you do those things. And if you don't, then have someone else who knows what they're doing come help you. And that's hire a coach. How do I get through? How do I
Right.
do this? What do I need to be worried about? What am I looking at? How do I interpret weather? What should I be most concerned about with, like I'm 3 days offshore and this happens. What do I do about that?
Hmm.
So it forces you to think through some things. But having a coach or someone experienced mentor help you with those events, it'll give you the peace of mind you need, because 2 o'clock in the morning when you're going around Hatteras and your head sail starts coming down, which is what happened to us on that last go, when we helped our friends.
Right.
He had not inspected his head sail, and there we were off Cape Lookout, and 2 o'clock in the morning, and the head sail starts coming down. Like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
So, and that
Yeah.
that was another thing that we never set out to make a YouTube channel. That was never our goal. Our goal
Hmm.
was to go have experiences as a family and push our
Hmm.
limits and sort of step through the fear that had been holding us back. And
Right.
making videos is a full-time job. You can talk to anyone. We
Oh
met
God.
Delos, sailing Delos. They were out there. There were a couple of other people who, I mean, they do amazing work, but it is a
Sure.
full-time job making those videos, and that was never our intention. But
Hmm.
I'll conclude with this, because I had friends who, a lot of people would inquire and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and like, okay, great, tell me when you're ready to do it, for one thing.
Right.
Telling me I have a dream. I worked for an admiral who used to say, I can't resource a dream, I can resource a plan. Okay, come to me with a plan and we can provide resources for that. But if you come to me with I wish one day we could, oh, okay, great. Tell me when you can, because otherwise you're just wasting my time. Happy to talk to you about it,
Hmm.
but if I don't have time, I'm not going to do that. But one of the things I told my friend was, look, no one out here in the cruising community is sitting around on their couch watching YouTube videos of people going to Walmart. Okay, we're just not doing
That's a good
it. It is.
analogy. Yeah,
If this is
exactly.
something that you
Yeah.
want to do, then do it. There are plenty
Yeah.
of YouTube videos out there that will inspire you. They don't tell the whole story ever. They always show they're
Hmm.
heavily edited, of course. There's not the raw footage of the boat coming apart as you're going around Punta Mala, stuff flying everywhere and people throwing up over the side, and, fish blood and
Right.
all that. But it's,
Yeah, they always share the good
yeah,
stuff.
exactly, right? Like, oh, this is great. Look at us with cocktails and here we are and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, 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 that's not how it is.
I don't know if it was Sailing Delos. I don't know which one it was, but 2 years ago, the last time we had a boat show, one of them was at the Newport Boat Show, and they drew the biggest
Oh,
crowd.
that was La Vagabond. That was Newport.
Oh, the
That was
Vagabond. Okay,
2019. I
yeah.
was at that boat show, and that was sailing La Vagabond.
Okay.
And we went down to the Annapolis Boat Show, and we heard some. They were there as well that same year, and we some of the diehard cruisers, like the old crusty ones. Who wrote Storm Tactics? Oh shoot, she's huge in the cruising community. She and her husband. Gosh, anyway, she was there. She signed my copy, but she was like, "Ah, those people, they don't give back. They don't give back to the sailing community." And in many ways, she was
Yeah.
right. They were in it for themselves. And a lot of people who make these YouTube videos,
Mm,
they are very useful. And I tried to,
mm,
when I had the opportunity, make a YouTube video that was as informative as possible, because I leveraged YouTube a lot to help troubleshoot and fix things. And so when I had the opportunity, like, hey, I'm doing engine maintenance, I'm going to walk you through what I'm doing. I'm pulling the injectors, I'm doing this, doing that. I'm going to
mm,
walk you through it, and maybe it'd be helpful to you. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. But
mm.
like going through the Panama Canal. Here's the Panama Canal. Here's how we did it.
That was
Yeah.
great.
So
I enjoyed
thank you.
that. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, that was one of the few that
Mm,
we did, and I've got to circle back and make some more now. But it was never our intention to have a YouTube channel and develop a following and try to be influencers. There are other people who are doing that, and for
no.
us, it was all about
Yeah.
looking inward, not looking outward. There are a couple guys out like Nick O'Kelly, who he has a Leopard 46. He does some amazing. He's a former weatherman, and he actually has a charter version 2012 Leopard 46, and he took I think the port forward stateroom and turned it into an audio studio, like a studio. He has a sound recording studio in
Yeah.
there, and he's got a ton of GoPros and everything else, and yeah, he's
Yeah.
done some incredible. And I was always jealous of that. I was like, wow, that guy's doing amazing work. But I mean, I don't have time. I got 2 kids
Mm,
on board. I mean, he doesn't have any, so I don't
no.
have time for that. So, and I'm not. I don't
Yeah.
want any of that stuff to come back and haunt them either. Like, oh, look at you, on a boat, and I don't, none of that stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want that. Well, good talking
yeah,
with you.
good
I
talking to you
appreciate it. I
too.
really appreciate the
Yeah,
time. And
absolutely.
if next time you're on the East Coast, look us up.
I would love to get you out here too. We're going to be out here for a while. So no rush. Yep.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to Standing Before the Mast podcast with Chris Heaton, sponsored by Newport Nautical Supply. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.